פסח הגיע אשתי בטרפת, בוקר עד ערב רוחצת שוטפת, חלונות ותריסים מצוחצחים, אלה דברים שאותם משמחים. מרימת הספת הילדים היא שואבת, אוחזת בדייסון נראית מאוהבת, מגיעה לתקרה בלי שום עזרה, אם יהיה פה פירור יהיה היום ונורא.
רצפה שוטפת, כוסות וקרצפת, פירורים אוספת, מחבואים חושפת, עצבים חוטפת, בילדים נוזפת, חמץ שורפת, חמץ שורפת.
יצאנו לדודה לחגוג ליל הסדר, שעות בפקקים, עצבים, חום וסבל, חשוב להספיק להגיע בזמן, אחרת תשב בכיסא הקטן. מת מרעב, לא אכלתי שבוע, האחיין שלי כמו גנץ על מילה הוא תקוע. 10 מכות, 1000 ברכות, מחכים כבר לאוכל 3 שעות.
כרפס אוכל, מרו אוכל, קציצות אוכל, מצות אוכל, מכות אוכל, חפירות אוכל, אפיקומן אוכל, גפילטע פיש לא אוכל.
נגמר ליל הסדר, אכלת שבעת, עכשיו מתווכחים מי יחזיר את הסבתא. מה נשתנה מכל הלילות, מכרנו מאז למצרים צוללות.
There we go. It took a little bit of effort on my part to get out of screen share, but okay, yes, admittedly, that was entirely B'ivrit in Hebrew. However, I think if you go back and review the images, you can figure out virtually everything going on in that. And first of all, it's good for us to be exposed to Israeli perspectives. But second of all, some things are universal. When you're Jewish, it doesn't matter what part of the world you're from. I think you'll recognize most of the themes in that particular piece. So, which brings us to the question, why am I talking about Pesach? We haven't even gotten to Tu B'Shvat yet. We're still worrying about whether trees are going to have a new year, and yet we're thinking about Pesach? Well, that's entirely the fault of our Torah portion this week, because we are in what I think is the third portion of Exodus, Bo, which literally means to go forth or get out of there. But we haven't quite gotten to that point yet. What we have is a continuing confrontation between Moses and Pharaoh as the number of makot, that is plagues or blows or strikes literally, accelerate upon the Egyptians because of Pharaoh's intransigence, which, as we talked about last week, may or may not be his own fault. But in any case, things are accelerating. And then right there in chapter 12 of our Torah portion, just as we're expecting everything to just come to a head, we go to commercial. Yeah. Well, not quite, but important enough. What happens is in chapter 12 that God interrupts the action and explains to Moses about what we're supposed to do about this. And it's not simply about preparing ourselves to depart, but actually in our Torah portion, we are given the essential points of how we are supposed to remember the events that have not just yet happened. So we're moving back and forth, or as the rabbis and the sages like to say, there's no before or after in the Torah. Everything's sort of happening in a state of temporal fugue. And before Moses even gets to deliver the final, most shocking plagues, God is already telling him the outcome, but more importantly, what we're supposed to do with the events that we've experienced. And so the first outlines of the Seder come about. Now, as you can see from the video, there are many things associated with the Seder today that have nothing to do with the Exodus from Egypt. There are no instructions in the Torah to clean our house. There are no instructions in the Torah concerning Pesach for us to drink 4 cups of wine or to do many of the customs that we experience, ask the questions, things like this. Rather, we are told in a rather streamlined form that we are to teach our children about the events and to remind them and make sure that in every generation we know the essential story, because it is the essential story. And so that's where we get hung up. And it's not until we get to the next portion that we actually get to hear about the Exodus from Egypt. So from a dramatic point of view, it's something of a interregnum, an interruption, a hesitation as far as drama goes, or maybe it's a bit of a cliffhanger, but it illustrates 2 important points. The first is, or 3 important points. The first is that Jews need to remain distinct. We should have our own particular way of celebrating, remembering, that's going to be different from the general culture. And as I implied earlier in some of my comments, part of the issue may be, as one midrash suggests, that we were becoming too comfortable in the land of Egypt, that we were becoming too Egyptianized, too assimilated. And so God may have intervened, Dafka, ironically, because we were getting too comfortable with our situation as slaves in the land of Egypt. So, in order to keep us Israelite, in order to help us remain the distinct people that God selected, he brings us out and takes us to the land that he promised us. All right. So, what else can we learn from that? Well, the second most important thing is something that I think every Jewish parent absorbs with their matzo ball soup, which is the importance of education. Education's right there at the heart of the whole story. We need to know. In particular, it's not quite history, because of course I like to call it our sacred history, but it's not quite history. It's memory. And not memory of things that we have experienced, but memories of our ancestors' experience. And that's a different thing. It's a kind of constructed memory. Now, how do you construct a memory of something you haven't experienced? And this is where the Jewish genius really comes in, because the strategy is to ritualize it. And so even though our Torah portion provides us only the merest skeleton of what a Seder should look like, over the centuries, indeed over the millennia, Jews have constructed a very elaborate ritual dinner built upon the bones, upon the foundation of what our ancestors experienced at the first Seder, at the going out from Egypt. And we've just added bells and whistles and all kinds of cool stuff, and GPS and all the things that you really want. Chairs that heat your tushy. I'm thinking a little bit more about cars right now and all the things we put in cars. But in any case, what we've added is a glorious number of additional memorable things. We've added all the different food, even though the man in our video refuses to eat gefilte fish. It certainly is one of the more distinctive foods of the holiday. Of course, at the center of it all is matzah, which is mentioned in the Bible, but what we do to it, how we manipulate it, how we present it, how we turn it into soup, these are all things that we have added to enhance our memory of the experience. And then, of course, we recount the whole story. We tell the story in a kind of I don't know quite how to describe it, paraphrastic kind of roundabout way that makes us think about it. And oftentimes people sit there and say, well, this isn't quite the way the story is told in the book of Exodus. Well, yes, and you've noticed the difference, so you're thinking about it. But the rituals also include the 4 questions, which aren't in the Bible, though the rabbis do manage to find 4 verses to justify the 4 questions. There's also the 4 cups of wine, not in the Bible. However, the rabbis once again find what's called an asmachta, a little hook in the Bible, the 4 verses where God tells us he's going to deliver us. And apparently we're supposed to rejoice with each one of those verses, so we drink wine. And the cup of Elijah, the egg, the shank bone, the various vegetables, the fruit compote, all of these things are meant to ritualize our memory. And even if we can't recall the dusty fields of Goshen, well, of course we can go and watch that classic Cecil B. DeMille movie, and you see the overhead shot of all the Israelites surging out between the sphinxes at the gates of Egypt. So you get a sort of a cinematic memory, but we certainly construct a memory that is almost irreducible. If you've been to 3 or 4 Seders, you never forget. And that's the genius of the Jewish method of learning. So, just as doctors see one, assist one, do one in order to learn what to do, we just have you child Seder, teen Seder, adult Seder, and you're ready forever to be able to do that. So that's our Torah portion this week. There's not a lot else to report, but just realize how much our tradition is a cumulative tradition that takes the scaffolding of the Bible and constructs a beautiful cathedral of practices and experiences out of it. And you get a little taste of the genius of the Jewish mind and the eternality of Jewish tradition. So that's it for this week, and I look forward to sharing with you our next Torah portion when we actually do get out of the land of Egypt and see what happens there. Thank you all.